All right, guys, let's get this going. Welcome back to the podcast. So, if you're watching this podcast on YouTube, you're already going to know this, but if you're listening to the podcast on Apple Podcast or Spotify, we are back to doing podcasts on video. So, I know a lot of people have been asking for this. I've had a lot of you guys reaching out to me asking me, Taryn, when are you going to do videos on or podcasts on video again? And I get it. There's a lot of stuff that we talk about that's really good to see. In today's podcast, I need you guys' help. This is going to be a topic that I really want some input on, would love some suggestions on. Really like to make this podcast more of a dialogue, which is kind of weird to do with the podcast platform. But the cool thing about our platforms and our social media and stuff like that nowadays is we can interact, we can communicate, and I really want to know your guys' thoughts on this. So if you're listening to this podcast or starting this podcast, stay tuned. I need some help from you guys. I'd love to get you guys' opinions on some things, but this is a podcast that's going to be really good to be watching on video. So if you're listening to this, wherever you're listening to it, and have the ability to watch it on the video, go ahead and check that out. Before we get into that though, let's jump to the intro. All right, guys. So I'm here in the office, still doing a lot of work on the office as far as the podcasting goes and the videoing goes. It's all going to be over here in my office, but I did get this cool banner from Chad, and I think he must be telling me something because he's telling me to shoot more and suck less. So I don't know, Chad, are you telling me that I suck at shooting and I need to shoot more? No, we were out at his house a couple weeks ago, and I actually saw this on the wall of his garage, and I was like, hey, that's a pretty sweet banner. And then we walked inside, and he gave me my birthday present a little early, and it was this banner. And so I was like, oh, I know a perfect spot for that. That's gonna be the background for my podcast for a little while until we get the other side filled, and then we'll have, I got my blacktail over here. Hopefully we'll get the red stag back sometime. There's a picture of it on the old phone, still my screensaver. But we'll get those kind of in the background, make it a cool little setting for the podcast, kind of similar to what I had previously. But I am going to video these podcasts going forward, just because I want to start doing a lot more visual stuff, whether that's product reviews, whether it's talking about different products, talking about different things that we use in our industry and what we're doing. And so I think it's going to make more sense to get back to doing video podcasting. I've had a couple cool podcasts with some other folks just here in the recent past. I'm sure if you guys have been listening to the podcast, you have listened to those podcasts. And I've said that, I wasn't doing video podcasting anymore. Had off conversations with those guys, and they're like, Taryn, man, you got to get back to doing video podcasts. So here we are, guys. We're going to do it. I'm excited. I actually really like doing video podcasts because then I can kind of be more descriptive and talk about some things that, and it'll make a little bit more sense as we talk about it. So today we're gonna talk about broadheads. So at the time of this recording, we're right in the heart of hunting season. The archery hunt here in Utah just finished up. I had my archery tag. I'm gonna tell you the story of what happened there here in just a little bit. We'll get into that. But a little bit of a disappointment with the Utah archery hunt, but we got some more hunts coming up. I'm excited. I've got Jaden's hunt coming up. He's my son. He's got a rifle hunt here in Utah, and just got some cool hunts that are coming up that I'm really excited about. Wishing I was in Wyoming right now with my buddy Chad, because he's up there hunting elk right now, and yeah, it'd be awesome to be up there just capturing some video. I told him to get some good video, so if he does, then we'll definitely get that up on the YouTube channel. So, which is a great reminder, guys. Make sure that if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, go on there, get subscribed. I'd really appreciate it. You don't know how much that helps the eHunter platform with having those subscribers on there, those views, like, comment, all those things. And with this podcast specifically, did I just say specifically? Specifically, make sure comment below. Let's get some chatter going on here. I am responding to every single comment you guys are putting on there. I want to have this dialogue with you guys as we talk about this. So let's jump into it. Today I want to talk about broadheads, something that's been on my mind a lot lately. I've watched a lot of videos about every single broadhead out there. And as you guys know, we've had a partnership kind of with Grim Reaper. And I've been using the Grim Reaper broadheads. In fact, so I've got some here that we're going to talk about. So I've got a Grim Reaper broadhead, if you guys can see that on the video. So I really love the Grim Reaper broadheads. I'm going to talk a little bit about it today and get your guys' thoughts and maybe some suggestions on some things. But let me kind of give you the backstory of where this podcast is coming from. So I've been on 2 archery hunts this year, and the first one was my stag in New Zealand, and then my second one was just this last one here in Utah for mule deer. And we'll start with the stag hunt. So if you guys haven't watched that video, I'll put a link up here for the video so you guys can go and watch that. Also did a podcast talking about the little bit of the backstory with that hunt, maybe some details that you won't get in the video. But during that hunt, it was a great hunt, had a great time, harvested, and like I said, an amazing, you guys see my ring notification, but great stag. I mean, just a gorgeous animal. Lots of pictures up on our social media platforms, especially Instagram. There's some really cool posts on Instagram about our stags, but harvested a stag of a lifetime, something I've wanted to do my whole life. You guys have heard the story. But I wanted to talk a little bit more in detail, specific to broadheads with that hunt. So, and actually, you know what? Let me back up a little bit more before I even get to that. So I switched over to Grim Reaper broadheads. It's been a couple years ago now. Prior to that, I used a couple different kinds. I used the Rage broadheads. I've used the Muzzy broadheads. In fact, that three-bladed Muzzy broadhead was one of my favorite broadheads I've ever used. And I'm honestly thinking about going back to it right now. We'll get more into that. In fact, I've got one of my old, I never used this one. So this is the Rage broadhead here, or one of the Rage. So Rage it's a cool broadhead. I feel like when it came to mechanicals, I'm not going to say they were the trendsetters for it, but man, they came in and really took over the mechanical world of broadheads. When I switched from the Muzzy 3-blade, I switched to these Rage broadheads. I wanted to switch to mechanical just because mechanicals really do fly very similar to a field tip. And so I loved it that I could shoot my field tips and my broadheads and basically not have to change my bow setup at all. It was one of my favorite things. Broadhead tuning with a mechanical, obviously a lot simpler. There's a lot less to it. Don't even have to do it on some of them, which is amazing, or don't have to do a lot of changes, I guess I should say, with them. So I switched over to these after switching from the Muzzy fixed blades over to these mechanicals, and I used a couple different kinds of Rage. These are the Rage hypodermic. So this is a 2-inch cut on these blades. So basically they come in, this is the no collar one. So it pops out, and if you guys can see it there, you got a 2-inch cut as that goes through it. I loved this broadhead for a couple of reasons. One is, it flew very well. I love how it locks back into the first Rages I had the rubber, like an O-ring on it that held it in place. And it was a mess trying to get those things back together. These ones are great because as soon as they go inside, it pushes here and it deploys the blades out and it makes a really big cut in the animal. I like these hypodermics because they would pass through the animal super easily and left a pretty good wound channel. What I found with these is I found a little bit of a failure with expansion on a couple animals that I shot, and that's partially the reason I switched away from it. The other reason I switched away from it, so this is the hypodermic. So if you look at the tip there, I'll try to put it on the banner so you guys can see that tip. It's a very small, lightweight tip. And so it's not going to do well when it hits bone. And I found that out, hit the shoulder of a cow elk, and it pretty much stopped in that shoulder. I shouldn't say that. It did penetrate, but it really messed up the front of this broadhead. And I wish I still had it to show you guys, but it did not do well going through the bone, the front shoulder of an elk. And so that's what I was like, oh man, I kind of missed that. Because again, those Muzzy 3 blades, I can't remember what the tip was on those things, what they were called. A lot of guys are out there, I probably could Google it. A lot of guys out there probably know exactly what I'm talking about, but it had that solid tip, very similar to what this Grim Reaper has. But it would punch through the shoulders pretty handily, which was awesome. So I switched away. That's when I was like, okay, so with these Rages, maybe I ought to do something a little bit different. And Rage has some different, points on them and things like that. But at that time, I was like, okay, I'm going to reevaluate and kind of maybe go in a different direction. And so I switched from the Rage over to Grim Reaper. So Grim Reaper is a local Utah company, and I love supporting local Utah companies if I can. They make some really good stuff. I have some friends that have used Grim Reapers a lot, and so I was like, I'm gonna go ahead and try it. And so the first Grim Reaper broadheads that I used were the I think it was the Whitetail Special. So it's a big spread, and I liked them, but I kind of worried about the same thing that I worried about with the Rage broadheads, in that I was, man, is it gonna go through a shoulder of an elk like I want it to? And so I looked at a couple different ones. They have the hybrid one where it's a bit of a fixed blade, and then it's got the mechanicals that pop out. I liked it, but there was a little bit too much to it that I think could fail. And so I was like, no, I'm not gonna do that. And so I found these razor tips. I found them. I mean, they're you can look online. You can see every single one of their broadheads. But I found these razor tips, and like I said, I love the tip on that because it is a solid. It looks like it's going to mess something up. It's got these little bleeders on it, little blades on it that are bleeders. So then when this hits the animal, it's like a little bit of a magnet, but it deploys like that. And so then it goes through the animal like that. So, and in theory, I was like, okay, this is really the perfect broadhead for me because, again, it's a mechanical. It's a 3 blade. I love that, but it's mechanical, so it's going to fly like my field tips. It does. I've shot it so much, and it absolutely does. I loved how easy these blades flip back up, and it's put away, no problem. Really, I've loved this broadhead. I really have. So the issue that I've had goes back to our story about the stag. So in New Zealand, hunting red stag. And this is the broadhead that's on the front of my arrow. In fact, I have that arrow. Let me grab it real quick. So this is the arrow. Actually, I haven't even cleaned it up. You guys can see there's some blood and stuff on it. But this is the arrow that I shot my stag with, and it performed well as far as deploying, cutting, and it cut a lot as it went through. So on my stag, this arrow, I shot him on the right side at 28 yards. It went all the way through, and then as it was coming out the back side, the exit, it actually caught on the fletchings and held the arrow. And he ran, about 250 yards. He trotted off that far before he finally laid down to die. But that arrow stayed in him the entire time he was walking out there. And even after he died, when I walked up to get him, this was sticking out the side of him. So it didn't go all the way through. And I thought, well, you know what? Maybe it's just him. Because I have shot a mule deer where it did go all the way through. And so I was like, well, maybe it's just stags are tough. It's not a big deal. I would have loved a clean pass through, just to give, because I feel like leaving that arrow in the animal gives it a spot to clot up and not bleed. And as we know, the more blood, more it bleeds, the quicker it's going to die. Luckily, I double lunged him, and he was, he didn't go far, but I was a little disappointed that it didn't go all the way through. Again, for the reasons I just said. So anyways, that I didn't think too much about it at the time. I was like, okay, that just happened. just going to throw it over there. That's just, it is what it is. And so again, didn't think too much about it. Happy I got my stag, and I knew my mule deer hunt was coming up. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to stick with my broadhead I've been using. No time, it's not the right time to be changing that at this point. And so I did. I left it on, and again, I shot the Total Archery Challenge in between, used my field tips and used my broadheads, shooting the same target, everything like that. It flies the same way. I guess for the Total Archery Challenge, I did switch arrows, so I wasn't using these Maxima Reds for the Total Archery Challenge. So I did actually switch arrows, so I did have to switch some, like my sight tape and stuff like that. But in between that time, when I would shoot my Maxima Red arrows, I could flip between my field point and my broadhead, and it was really the same exact point that it would hit the target. I know there's a word for that, but impact point. Same impact point for my field tips and my broadheads. And so I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll use it for the deer hunt. I'm just going to keep using these because I really, again, there's so many things that I like about this broadhead that I was like, no, I'm just going to keep doing it. So now it came time for my Utah archery hunt. And these are in my quiver. And we had a great hunt, guys. It was a lot of fun. Got to chase some really good bucks. There was a buck that I had been looking for all summer long, been following him, got good trail cam pictures of him prior to the August 1st, deadline of when you can have trail cameras out here in Utah. Really followed him all summer long. And really cool buck. I think he was probably, if I was to score him, it's so hard to score in the velvet, but just a solid 4-point. I'd say probably 180-ish, 180 buck, which is a really good buck. General season, super stoked about him, and chased him, and never could end up getting a shot off on him. I got close a couple times. But one thing I didn't want to do is I didn't want to just completely blow him out of where he was at. That doesn't do me any favors, and there's a lot of hunting left to go this year. And so I didn't really push the envelope on him. I hunted some other areas. It came down to basically the last week of the hunt, and there was another spot that I went to a couple times, and we went out to the spot again. It was actually me and my cousin's son was with me, and we found a couple good bucks. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna make it happen. You know what? At the end of the day, I'm a meat eater, and like good old Steven Ranella, I like to eat wild game meat. And I was like, I'm gonna put some meat in the freezer. Good buck, still not an itty bitty buck, but just a decent buck. And I'm like, okay, let's go ahead and make this happen. He was a good 3x4. For those wondering, for those Easterners, 3x4, 3 on one side, 4 on the other. So had pretty cool eye guards too, which was cool too. So cool story. So we saw him, and actually I took a couple shots at first, about 70 yards, and I hit this limb on the first one. I know, classic archery story, right? I hit the limb. Every archer says that. I promise I did hit the limb, because I was shooting between these trees, and I was like, okay, well, he didn't go anywhere after I shot that first shot, because it kind of took it off to the side a little bit. So I moved over to another gap I had, and I'm shooting through like a 3-foot gap in between quaking aspen trees. And I shoot again, and sure enough, there's another limb. And I know everybody's like, yeah, right, BS, Taryn, you didn't do this. But it really hit another limb on my second shot. And he kind of ran off there, and we just kind of sat there for a second. He didn't go too far. And then him and another buck started like kind of feeding back over towards us. I'm like, I'm going to sneak down. I'm going to make this happen. And so I took about 45 minutes, did about a 45-minute stalk, got down to these bucks, and luckily the one was sitting there raking, trying to get the velvet off of his antlers. And so he was making a lot of noise raking. So I could kind of sneak in on him, and got to about 40 yards, and perfect broadside. I'm like, all right, here we go. We'll make it happen. So I drew back and let it go, sunk it in him. He ran down about 100 yards and kind of turned to go up a little incline there, and he couldn't go up the incline. And I could see again, the fletchings. If you guys can see that, I have white and red fletchings on my arrows. I could see the fletchings sticking out right in the pump station, man, like right where you want it to be. I'm like, golden. We're done. And as he tried to go up that little hill, he couldn't. So he started walking backwards, and then he ended up falling back against the hillside, on the other side. And I was like, game over, done. That arrow, even though it didn't pass through, still did what it needed to do. Dead animal. So I could only see like the top of his back, but had fallen down and was laying there. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to leave him there. I'm going to go back to my cousin, grab my backpack and all that stuff, and then we'll come back down, take care of him, and hike him out of here, So I went back up to him. We kind of hung out there for a little bit, gave it about an hour, and then went down to get him, and he wasn't there. And we looked all over for him. Finally, Austin, my cousin, he finally found some blood, and so we started tracking it, and we tracked it for about 4 hours. And then all of a sudden the blood was gone, and it was hardly, there were some parts that had really good blood. In fact, we found a blood clot that was the size of a softball. That might be exaggerating a little bit, maybe the size of a baseball, but it was a pretty good clot of blood there on the ground. We saw that a few times, and so like, oh man, yeah, he's hit good. He's not going to go far. So once the blood dried up, we just kind of gridded all around there, because we're like, he can't be far. He's got to be right there. Spent the entire day just sitting there looking for him, and we were never able to turn him up. So basically kind of considered that my tag, and punched my tag. And but I was really bummed that we weren't able to find him. I thought for sure, that we'd be able to find him. And the blood that we saw, like I said, there were some spots that were really good. I'm like, okay, that's a lot of blood. But for the most part, and the reason it took us 4 hours of just tracking blood until we finally lost it was because it was just little drops here and there. And I mean, we were finding just a drop on a piece of wood, or a drop on a leaf, or in the dirt. You could see how it kind of hit the dirt and spread out because it was so dry. But I was really, really disappointed that this arrow didn't pass all the way through that deer. I feel like if the arrow would have passed all the way through the deer, that it would have created a big wound channel for one, but then it also would have given two sides of him to bleed out. And I think if it would have gone completely out that other side and left a hole on that other side, again, when these things open up, if you guys are watching on YouTube, I mean, that's a big cut as those 3 blades go through. So if that would go all the way through, let the arrow come completely out, it bleeds a lot. And I've seen it. It has done it. So really disappointed. If you guys have ever had an animal that you couldn't recover, the feeling that I have right now as far as that goes. Really bummed that I didn't get that meat. I was really excited about that. Really excited to have another archery. Anytime you get an archery harvest, it's a pretty big deal. And so I was just super excited about it. But I was bummed. So it got me thinking. And I'm playing that over in my head a lot, of looking at that deer, like I said, as he was going up that little incline, and seeing my white fletching sticking out right in that pocket. I mean, guys, it was only 40 yards, but just a great, perfect placement of a shot. I was so stoked. I'm like, this is golden. I couldn't ask for any better. As I've thought about that and played that over in my mind, I've thought about this broadhead. And I thought, what makes it so that this broadhead doesn't pass through a stag, a red deer, or a mule deer? And my only thought is, and this is where I want to get your guys' opinion, is when these things come out, I wonder if that's taking a lot of the energy away from that arrow as it's going through, and not allow, it's sucking up all that energy so that the arrow doesn't go all the way through. Whereas the hypodermics from Rage, again, these things always pass through as long as I don't hit a bone. And even if I glance off a rib, they still just go flying right through. That's my only thought, is that this is just taking up too much energy to open up those blades. And it's a good sized broadhead. Still, it's only 100 grains, but it's still a good sized broadhead going through that animal. And I just wonder if it's robbing all of the energy as it's going through the animal and not allowing that arrow to pass all the way through. because Chad, with his stag in New Zealand, he was shooting the iron wheels. So it's a 2-blade fixed broadhead. It's a thicker broadhead. Pretty gnarly looking thing. It's actually, I shouldn't say gnarly. It's kind of primitive. I mean, there's really not a lot of what you'd say like technology to it. It's just a 2-blade fixed broadhead. They do have bleeders on them. So it's got these, if you guys can see in the video here, it's got these itty bitty little blades up here on the tip. So the iron wheel has those little itty bitty blades too. They call them bleeders, but it has those on there too. But his went through that stag. I mean, just zipped past it. Of course, it was only 17 yards, but mine was only 28 yards or 27 yards, whatever it was. So, really shouldn't be any difference. We're both shooting 70-pound bows, so it really shouldn't be that much difference with those. So his passed all the way through, and pretty much most other broadhead I've seen passes all the way through. So I'm not hating on Grim Reaper here because they've been good partners of ours, and we've had Matt on the podcast a couple times. In fact, I need to get him back on the podcast. Probably who I should have on this podcast as we're talking about this, and look forward to that. Maybe I'll get him on and we'll talk about this. Matt, if you're listening, let's chat. So it's got me thinking, what should I do with broadheads? Got a couple hunts coming up. So Chad and I are planning to go to Arizona to hunt mule deer. We have a black bear hunt coming up where we're going to be hunting with our bows. We've talked about taking our bows to Alaska to hunt moose. And the last thing I want to do is put an arrow in there that's not going to, penetrate the way that I want to. And man, if I could get a pass through on a big bull moose, that would be amazing. And so I've looked at a couple different ones. In fact, I've been talking to some friends, some of the big archery guys. So Tyler Stout, a good friend of mine, he's been on the podcast a couple times as well. And talked about a couple different broadheads out there. So one that I'm really looking at is the Bloodsport. It's a 2-blade broadhead, similar to the Rage. It deploys a little bit differently though. In fact, the deployment on it is a little bit more similar to the Grim Reaper, but again, it's only 2 blades. The thing I like about it is it's got a big cut like the Rage has on it. I keep pulling these blades out. It's probably going to cut my finger. So if you're watching on YouTube, you might see some blood flying here in a minute if I end up cutting my finger, because these dang things are sharp. They're way sharp. But yeah, I'm kind of I'm not at a loss here, but I want to do what's right. With archery hunting, you want to do what's right. You want to harvest an animal. You want to find that animal. You want to enjoy the fruits of that and give that animal the respect it deserves by consuming the meat that comes from it and feeding my family. So I want to find a broadhead that really does what I need it to do. Really looked at the iron wheels as well. I'm not sure that they're what I want either. I want something that's really going to cause a lot of havoc when it goes inside. I'd really love, and maybe this is what I ought to do. I can't remember the name of the Rage, but Rage does make one that has more of this solid, heavier tip on it that would go through bone. Maybe that's what I look at is that. And that's honestly what those Bloodsports have on them, is they got that heavier tip. They've got the deployment of the 2 blades. They have a really big cutting diameter. I believe it's 2 or 2.5 inches cutting diameter. Tyler sent me a video of one as it went through an animal, and I think it was a cow elk, and it was absolutely devastating. So again, want something that goes all the way through the animal. It's devastating as it goes through. And honestly, I've even thought about, I'm considered going to fixed blade, going back to like maybe a G5 or something like the Muzzy. Was it a Muzzy Trocar? Is that what it was? Man, that name's, I feel like that's what it was. But anyways, just a gnarly broadhead. But even, like I said, even go back to a fixed blade, just for the reason of, when these mechanicals go through the animal, I don't want it to rob any energy. I mean, any broadhead's it's going to lose its energy as it's going through the animal, but lose enough energy that it doesn't go all the way through. I was, again, very disappointed with that deer this year. And again, nothing against Grim Reaper. They have a lot of really good broadheads, and maybe I just need to switch and do a different broadhead from Grim Reaper. But really disappointed at 40 yards, shooting a 70-pound bow. My arrows, for those that are, you junkies out there, my arrows, here, I'll weigh it right now and tell you exactly what it is. So you guys on video are going to see me weighing. By the way, guys, this little Last Chance Archery scale, I love this thing. I may even do a review on it for those of you that are, just tinkers and like to do stuff with your own arrows. So, okay, so this guy is 480 grains. So 480 grains. So I guess maybe I need to do a little bit heavier arrow with this broadhead, carry a little bit more kinetic energy as it's going into the animal. I mean, I feel like 480 grains should do it. I do need to probably push it up into the 5s for my elk hunting arrows, but I thought for a mule deer, this is actually, I've killed elk with this exact same arrow. So I don't know. I feel like it's heavy enough. It should work. So I'd love to know your guys' thoughts on this, as far as what broadheads are you guys using? And I get it. There's a vast amount of broadheads out there, and everybody's got their own opinions, but I'd really love to know some true success stories with it. Maybe some of you guys have really tried and trued some of your broadheads, stuck with it for a long time. That's probably another issue I have, is I like to tinker, I like to change, I like to do different things. And so maybe I need to find one and just stick with it. I kind of do that with my rifle and stuff like that. I find a load, I do my own reloading. And so I'll find a load that works and I won't go away from that load. But when it comes to archery, I love tinkering, and I love putting different things on arrows, whether it's changing vanes, whether it's changing nocks, different arrows, different, broadheads, whatever the case may be. But I don't know, just some thoughts about it, but I'd love to know your guys' thoughts. Again, I'd like this to be a little bit more interactive. Love to get you guys' comments on these things. YouTube is probably the best place to comment, just because it is so interactive there, and there's a lot of people looking at that. By the way, for you geeks out there, 480.6, just to be clear. 480.6 grains is my arrow weight. So anyways, love to know your guys' thoughts. I'm not gonna say that I'm a know-it-all when it comes to archery, and if you are, kudos to you, because there's not very many people. I mean, archery is forever changing. We're always trying and testing new things, doing different things, but would love to know your guys' thoughts on what you're using, what you feel has worked the best for your hunts. And guys, if you're an Eastern hunter and hunt whitetail, I'd love to know what you guys use as well. I mean, I get it. Most of your guys' shots are, 30, 40 yards and in. And so you guys can use some pretty gnarly broadheads doing that. When we got to send them 100 yards, I'm not going to send it 100 yards, but we out here in the West, it's not uncommon to have a 60-yard shot or even a 70-yard shot. And so when you're shooting out that far, you got to make sure that your arrow is broadhead tuned and you're comfortable shooting that far, which is possible. It's absolutely possible. Done it. It's worked well. But I'd love to know what broadheads you guys are using and what you have, and just get some thoughts from you guys as far as what this looks like. Again, I've got some archery hunts coming up. I know a lot of you guys still have some archery hunts. There's some late season archery hunts in Colorado and a few other places. I know back east, you guys are just getting rolling into some of your hunts and your archery hunts. So would love to get your guys' thoughts as far as, which one is best, which one you guys like, and maybe some details, guys. I get it. We all have our own passions and our own thoughts and opinions, but details, hey, this is why I don't use this one. Maybe why don't you use a Rage, or don't you use a Grim Reaper, and then why do you? And give me some details behind it. Again, I love Grim Reaper. Matt, if you're listening, again, I love Grim Reaper and love the company. Again, they're a local Utah company, and it's worked for me in the past, but I need something that's going to work all the time, every time, and I'm just afraid that this is not the broadhead for me. It may be for you. Some of you guys out there may be shooting a different style of arrow, maybe a heavier weighted arrow. Maybe this fits more for what you're doing, and this could be the perfect broadhead for you. And if you are, let me know. I'd really love to know if you use these razor tip broadheads and if it's been just the perfect broadhead for you. But if you guys use some other Grim Reapers, would love to know. Or if you use a different kind of broadhead, would love to know that too. So anyways, that's the conversation today. I hope you guys enjoy this. I hope this is something that you guys are looking forward to as far as the interaction goes between me and you guys, and as well as all of you guys interacting with each other. Would love to get this community going up. There will be an article up on our website about this topic. It should release this week as well. And then this video and this podcast will go up this week. But would love to get this conversation started and talking about this sooner rather than later. Going to have another podcast coming up on a couple different things. Big thing for eHunter, this is eHunter and Terran Hunt personally. Something that I'm going to be doing. You guys probably, if you're watching the video, probably notice I'm drinking a Monster over here. And I do love Monster. But this change I might not be drinking Monsters anymore. But more to come on that. That's a little bit of a teaser. But something, it's actually a done deal. I could say it, but I'll save it for the next podcast and video of what's going to be happening with this. I got some really cool reviews. One I've been teasing for a little bit while. It's actually sitting right over there. New bino harness. So stay tuned for that one. I don't think you guys are going to want to see that review and what that is all about, because it's pretty dang cool. Some things I want to tweak on it, and I'll talk about that. But all in all, it's pretty awesome. So will there be a podcast on that? I'm also going to do a video review on that, so you guys will see that as well. Got a couple other things. I don't have them right here close, but got some cool stuff that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk a lot more about products. Like I said, going back to these video podcasts, we're going to do more products. We're going to talk about certain things, get people on the podcast, get their faces on here so that you can see them and talk to them. But anyways, guys, make sure that you're subscribed to the podcast. If you're on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed to YouTube. YouTube. Again, like I said in the beginning, that's a big deal for me. If you guys would subscribe to that and make sure that you guys are supporting us on that, comment, like, all that stuff, all the stuff that you do like that really helps support me and eHunter. So would really appreciate that. Follow us on all our social media platforms. Got some fun reels up. If you guys haven't seen some of the reels that I posted lately, you guys got to go check those out. They're pretty dang good. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I just cracked myself up. I don't know. But anyways, guys, we're going to go ahead and close this one out. Pretty quick podcast for you guys, pretty quick video. But again, comment below. Let's get this conversation going. Let's talk about this. If we need to do a follow-up, that'd be great. If you guys want to be on a podcast to do a follow-up to this, let me know. Leave a comment below if you'd like to hop on the podcast with me. Talk about this subject of broadheads, because I think this could be a really good subject. If there's any broadhead companies out there watching, listening, love to have your opinions as well. If you're willing to jump on the podcast with me, that would be wonderful. If you want to put some comments, if you've got a broadhead that you think is better than what I've been using, let me know. I'd be happy to try something out and see what it can do. So anyways, guys, shoot more, suck less. That's a good motto for our world right now. So get out there, go shoot. In fact, that's probably what I'm going to go do is go shoot my bow a little bit right now. But I sure appreciate you guys. Love all the support. And man, couldn't do without you guys. See ya.